A runaway bride crashed the Mafia king's funeral, and before the rain could dry on her wedding dress, he looked at her and said, "Good. I needed a wife. But what kind of woman runs from a groom in front of 400 guests and chooses a dangerous stranger instead?" In New Orleans, under a sky split open by thunder, Clara Whitaker stood barefoot on cold church marble mascara on her cheeks, blood on her heel, and a ring finger meant for a man who never loved her right. Behind her, the past was pounding on the doors. In front of her stood Dominic Rourke, a man powerful enough to make the whole city lower its voice. Stay with this story because it is not just about romance. It is about power survival and the moment a woman stops being manageable. Like this video and comment where you're watching from. The ring on Clara's finger had not warmed to her skin yet, and already it felt heavier than the life she had just run from. 3 hours earlier, that same finger had been bare. 3 hours earlier, she had been standing in a bridal suite on the 12th floor of the Mercer Hotel, staring at a woman in the mirror who looked almost like her. The dress was perfect. Ivory silk-fitted bodice, long sleeves, a cathedral veil pinned into soft brown hair that had taken 2 women and 90 minutes to shape. Her makeup was soft enough to look innocent and expensive enough to survive tears, though no one had said that part out loud. The room smelled like roses, hairspray, champagne, and money. Outside the tall windows, New Orleans shone under a low gray sky. The streets below were wet from an early rain, the kind that made the pavement glow and turned every passing car into a streak of silver. Somewhere beyond the hotel, brass music drifted through the French Quarter, bright and careless, as if the city had no idea Clara Whitaker was standing in a wedding dress, trying not to disappear inside it. Her mother stood behind her, adjusting the veil with trembling fingers. "You look beautiful, baby." Clara smiled, because that was what beautiful brides did when their mothers were near tears. "Thank you, Mom." Helen Whitaker met her daughter's eyes in the mirror. She had the same green eyes as Clara, though hers had softer edges now worn down by years of bills, restaurant shifts, and loving a family through hard seasons. Her hands paused on the veil. "Are you nervous?" Clara looked at herself. The woman in the mirror looked calm. That had always been Clara's talent. She could make calm look natural even when her ribs felt too tight for her lungs. A little. Helen leaned closer and kissed the side of her head, careful not to disturb the makeup. "That is normal. Every bride feels that." Clara wanted to ask if every bride felt like the room had no door. She wanted to ask if every bride heard a small voice inside her saying, "Not yet. Not him. Not like this." She wanted to say that her chest had been hurting since sunrise, that Graham had sent 3 different assistants to check whether she was ready dressed, smiling, still agreeable. Instead, she nodded. On the vanity beside a crystal flute of champagne she had barely touched lay a folded note on thick cream paper. Smile. No surprises today. G. Clara had found it tucked under her perfume bottle when she came back from hair and makeup. The handwriting was elegant, sharp, certain of itself, like Graham Mercer, like everything Graham touched. Helen noticed Clara looking at it. That from him, Clara picked it up and folded it smaller. "Yes." "What did he say?" Clara slid the note into the drawer. "Just groom things." Helen did not push, but Clara could feel the questions staying in the room. That was another thing Graham had taught her. Questions did not vanish when ignored. They simply waited for a quieter place to breathe. A knock came at the door. Before Clara could answer, the wedding planner stepped inside with a tablet pressed to her chest and a smile that looked professionally anxious. 10 minutes to first look. Mr. Mercer would like everyone in position. Mr. Mercer would like. Clara had heard that phrase so many times in the past 6 months that it had become part of the wedding itself. Mr. Mercer would like peonies instead of garden roses. Mr. Mercer would like the dinner speech shortened. Mr. Mercer would like Clara's father to avoid any jokes about the restaurant. Mr. Mercer would like Clara to consider resigning after the honeymoon because a Mercer wife did not need to work under her husband. That last one had not come from the planner. That one Graham had set himself while fastening a diamond bracelet around Clara's wrist at a donor dinner. "You do enough for me already," he had murmured, smiling for the photographer. "After the wedding, you can stop pretending you need a title." At the time, Clara had laughed softly because people were watching. Later in the car, she had said, "I like my work." Graham had looked out the window. "You like being useful. There is a difference." The memory moved through her now, quick and cold. Helen stepped back and looked at the wedding planner. "Can you give us a minute?" The woman hesitated. "Of course, just 1 minute." When the door closed, Helen turned fully toward Clara. "You know you do not have to be perfect today." Clara almost laughed. Everything around her had been built to prove the opposite. 400 guests, 12 bridesmaids, 2 senators, 3 judges, a bishop, half of Graham's board, a ballroom covered in white flowers imported from places Clara had never visited, a cake taller than her youngest cousin, a string quartet in the chapel and a jazz band at the reception because Graham wanted tradition before the vows and personality after them. Not her personality, just enough personality for photos. "I know," Clara said. Helen touched her cheek. "You also know your father, and I love you no matter what." Clara turned her face into that touch for 1 second. Just one. Then she straightened. "I should find Graham before the photos." Helen's hand dropped. "Do you want me to come?" "No. I'm fine." The lie came easily. Too easily. Clara lifted the front of her dress and walked out into the hallway. The Mercer Hotel had been designed to make people feel small in a tasteful way. Marble floors, gold light fixtures, velvet chairs. No one looked comfortable sitting in. The hall outside the bridal suite was lined with white arrangements in tall glass vases, their petals heavy with water. Every door had a brass number polished bright enough to catch Clara's reflection as she passed. She saw herself in pieces, a white sleeve, a pale cheek, a mouth painted soft pink. A bride moving through a hotel like she was trespassing at her own wedding. At the corner near the service corridor, she heard Graham's voice. Clara stopped. The door to the private lounge was open just enough for sound to slip through. She recognized his laugh first, low, easy, controlled, the laugh he used when he wanted people to believe they were seeing the real him. Then a woman laughed too. Vanessa Pike. Clara knew that laugh. Everyone in Graham's circle did. Vanessa was an investor's daughter, a blonde socialite with a voice like champagne bubbles and eyes that never missed a weakness. She had been at every engagement event, always close enough to Graham to be noticed and far enough away to be denied. Clara did not move. Inside the lounge, Vanessa said, "You are really going through with it?" Graham answered without hesitation. "Of course I am. She does not seem like your type. She is exactly my type for this." Something in Clara's stomach turned hollow. Vanessa made a small sound. "That sounds cruel." "No. Cruel would be marrying someone unpredictable." There was a pause. Fabric shifted. A glass touched wood. Graham continued, voice lower now, softer in that way men get when they are touching someone they should not be touching. "Clara is loyal, quiet, good with numbers, good with schedules. She remembers names, birthdays, allergies, seating arrangements. She calms angry people before I have to deal with them. She makes me look stable." Vanessa laughed again, but this time there was something sharp inside it. "So she is staff with a ring." Graham did not deny it. "She is good wife material." Clara's fingers tightened around the silk of her dress. Vanessa said, "And me?" A silence followed. Then Graham said, "You are wildfire." Clara closed her eyes. She did not need to see them. She could hear the kiss, a quiet shift, a breath. Vanessa's soft little sigh practiced and pleased. Graham spoke again, careless now. Clara is manageable. The word did not break loudly. It slid into Clara like a thin blade and found every place she had already been bleeding. Manageable. 2 years arranged themselves in her mind with horrible clarity. Every time Graham corrected the way she spoke in meetings, every time he said, "Let me handle that," then used her notes to win the room. Every time he called her sensitive when she objected to being ignored. Every time he praised her in public with one hand on her lower back, steering her where he wanted her to stand. Every time he said he loved that she was not dramatic. Not dramatic meant silent. Not difficult meant obedient. Loyal meant available. Good meant small. Clara opened her eyes. She looked down at the diamond engagement ring on her finger. It was beautiful in the way locked doors can be beautiful if someone covers them in gold. Inside the lounge, Vanessa whispered something Clara did not catch. Graham laughed. That sound made the decision for her. Clara stepped back from the door. One step, then another. The heel of her shoe caught in the hem of her dress. She reached down, pulled both shoes off, and left them on the marble floor beside a vase of white roses. No speech, no confrontation, no scene. She simply ran. At first, no one understood what they were seeing. A bride running barefoot through the Mercer Hotel looked like a joke, a photo opportunity, a nervous mistake. A bridesmaid called her name. A groomsman turned with a glass in his hand. Someone laughed uncertainly. Then Clara hit the stairwell door with both palms and vanished inside. The stairs smelled like bleach and old metal. Her breath tore out of her as she ran down flight after flight, one hand gripping the rail, the other lifting the dress. The veil snagged on something behind her and yanked her head back. She ripped it loose without stopping. Pins scattered down the steps like tiny silver bones. By the time she reached the service exit, her lungs burned. The rain had started again. It came hard, slanting across the alley, cold against her face and neck. Clara pushed into it. Her bare feet hit wet pavement. Pain shot up from the rough ground, but she kept moving. Behind her, the hotel door slammed open. Clara Graham's voice cracked through the rain. She did not look back. Clara, stop. She ran harder. Her dress dragged through puddles. A passing car honked. Someone on the sidewalk turned and stared. The city blurred around her, all wrought iron balconies, slick brick neon signs flickering in the gray afternoon. Her heart pounded so hard she could barely hear the traffic. She turned down one street, then another. She did not know where she was going. That was the terrifying part. Also the cleanest part. For the first time in years, no one had chosen the route for her. A church rose at the end of the block. Old stone, tall doors, stained glass dark with rain. St. Augustine. The doors were open. Clara ran toward them because open doors are a kind of mercy when you have none left. She did not know there was a funeral inside. She did not know Dominic Rourke was burying his father beneath those arches. She did not know the Rourke family had ruled the New Orleans docks for 3 generations, half through contracts and half through fear. She only knew Graham was behind her. The rain was around her, and the church looked like a place where a desperate woman might disappear. That was what she thought she needed, to disappear. But across the city, Dominic Rourke had spent the morning learning that disappearing was no longer an option for him either. His father, Seamus Rourke, lay in a black coffin beneath white lilies, dressed in the same tailored severity he had worn in life. Even dead, he seemed impossible to argue with. Dominic stood at the front of the church with his hands folded before him, face unreadable, eyes dry. Men watched him from the pews with the careful stillness of people trying to guess the weather before a storm breaks. Dock captains, lawyers, priests, politicians who would deny knowing him if asked under oath. Old friends of his father, older enemies pretending to mourn. Cole Rourke sat in the first pew, one ankle over his knee. grief dressed up as boredom. He had Dominic's height, Dominic's gray eyes, Dominic's sharp jaw, but where Dominic looked carved from discipline, Cole looked like fire had once tried to become a man and changed its mind halfway through. "You look like you are waiting for a business meeting," Cole said under his breath. Dominic did not look at him. "I am," Cole smiled. "At our father's funeral. Touching." Dominic's gaze stayed on the coffin. Father would have appreciated efficiency. That made Cole's smile fade. The brothers had not spoken much since the will was read that morning in a paneled office above the river. Patrick Quinn had stood beside the attorney with his hands clasped behind his back, looking older than Dominic remembered. The will had been written in Seamus Rourke's voice even when read by another man. Control of Rourke Maritime Holdings. The family estate and all related voting rights would pass to the first son who entered a lawful marriage and produced a legitimate Rourke heir. First son, lawful marriage, legitimate heir. Every word had been sharpened before it was placed on the page. Cole had laughed when he heard it. Not because it was funny, because if he had not laughed, he might have torn the room apart. "He could not even die without making us race," Cole had said. Dominic had said nothing. Cole turned on him. "You knew." Dominic looked at the attorney, then at Patrick, then at his brother. "I suspected." "You always suspect. That is how you make betrayal sound like weather." Dominic had folded the copy of the will and placed it on the desk. "Are you finished?" Cole had stepped closer. "No, I am just getting started." Now in the church, Cole leaned back in the pew and stared at their father's coffin. "He wanted you to win," Cole murmured. Dominic answered quietly. "He wanted us to fight." Cole's jaw tightened. "Same thing where you are concerned." Before Dominic could answer, the church doors opened. Every head turned, and there she was, a bride, not polished, not smiling, not posed for photographs. A bride ruined by rain and fear and speed, barefoot on the marble aisle, eyes too bright, breath coming hard, dress stained with mud like the city itself had tried to hold her back and failed. For the first time that day, Dominic forgot the coffin. He saw the wedding dress first, then the shaking hands, then the way she looked toward the side doors before she looked at the men calculating exits even while panic tried to swallow her. Not helpless, cornered. There was a difference. Behind her, a man shouted from outside. Clara Dominic recognized the voice before he recognized the name. Graham Mercer. Mercer Logistics. Polished suits, dirty ledgers, political friends bought in careful installments. A man who smiled too often and owed too much to people he thought were beneath him. Dominic had disliked him for years. Now, Graham Mercer was pounding on a church door during Seamus Rourke's funeral, demanding a bride who looked like she would rather run barefoot through hell than go back to him. The universe, Dominic thought, had a vulgar sense of timing. Cole noticed the change in him. "Dom," he warned quietly. Dominic stepped into the aisle. The bride saw him coming and went still. Up close, she looked younger than he expected, and steadier than she had any right to be. Rain clung to her lashes. A streak of mascara had dried along her cheek. There was blood at her heel. Her chin trembled once, then lifted as if she had ordered it to. "I'm sorry," she said. "I did not know there was a funeral." Her voice was breathless but not weak. Dominic looked past her as the door shook again. "You are running from Mercer." Her eyes changed at the name. That was answer enough. "I just need a way out," she said. "A back door, a side entrance, anything." Dominic studied her. She was wearing a wedding dress. He needed a wife. Graham Mercer needed to lose face. Cole needed to be beaten to the will before he could weaponize it. The city needed to see Dominic Rourke as inevitable before anyone decided grief had made him vulnerable. One woman had walked into the center of all those problems wearing white. Dominic almost smiled. "What is your name?" She hesitated. "Clara." "Clara." "What?" Another pound hit the doors. "Whitaker." Dominic knew the name. Whitaker's Kitchen. Small restaurant near Magazine Street. Good gumbo, bad loan structure. Mercer connected debt. Patrick had mentioned it once in a report about Graham's side leverage. So Graham had not just wanted a wife. He had wanted a hostage who cooked his books with a smile. Dominic held out his hand. Clara Whitaker. I can get you out. She looked at his hand as if it might be a blade. At what price? Cole rose from the pew behind him. Dominic. Dominic ignored him. The bride did not. Her eyes flicked to Cole, then back to Dominic. What price? She repeated. Good, Dominic thought. Not stupid either. He leaned closer just enough that his voice did not travel. My name. The church seemed to tighten around them. Clara stared at him. You are insane. Sometimes. I am not marrying you. Then go back to him. The doors shook again. Graham's voice came through lower now, uglier because the public mask had slipped. Clara, open this door before you make this worse. Clara flinched, not much. Enough. Dominic saw it. So did Cole. Something cold moved through Dominic's chest. Not sympathy exactly. Sympathy was soft and useless. This was recognition. He knew what control looked like when dressed as concern. He had been raised by a master of it. Clara's hands curled into the wet silk of her dress. Dominic said, You need protection. I need a wife. Your groom needs to learn the difference between possession and power. She laughed once. It broke in the middle. That is the least romantic proposal I have ever heard. I am not proposing romance. No. You are proposing madness. I am proposing survival. The word landed. Survival. Clara looked toward the doors again, then toward the coffin, then at the men watching from the pews. Her mind moved behind her eyes fast and frightened and furious. Dominic could almost see her weighing the world she knew against the one standing in front of her. Graham shouted her name again. Clara turned back to Dominic. If I say yes, you keep him away from me. Yes, you do not touch me. Dominic's expression did not change. Yes, this is temporary. Yes, and my family stays out of whatever this is. A pause. Dominic thought of Ray Whitaker's debt, of Graham's hand around a family restaurant squeezing slowly. He said, I will handle your family. Clara's eyes narrowed. That is not what I said. There it was, the spine under all that wet lace. Dominic held her gaze. Then I will protect them. Clara did not trust him. He could see that clearly, but trust was a luxury for people with time. She had none. Neither did he. She placed her hand in his. Her fingers were cold. Dominic closed his around them. Cole cursed softly behind him, and somewhere outside Graham Mercer kept pounding on a door that no longer belonged to him. The ceremony itself passed like a fever. A side chapel, candle smoke, rain tapping at stained glass. A priest who had known the Rourkes long enough to understand when questions became dangerous. Patrick Quinn stood witness with a face like stone. Another Rourke captain stood beside him, eyes on the door. Clara repeated the vows in a voice that did not sound like surrender. That surprised Dominic. Most frightened people rushed words to get through them. Clara placed each one carefully like stepping stones over deep water. When the priest asked Dominic, he answered without hesitation. I do. Patrick removed a signet ring from his own hand and passed it to Dominic. Heavy gold. The Rourke crest worn smooth by years of use. Dominic took Clara's left hand. She whispered, This does not make me yours. Dominic slid the ring onto her finger. It was too large, so he turned it inward, pressing the crest into her palm. No, he said quietly. It makes you untouchable. For 1 second, something uncertain moved across her face. Not gratitude, not relief. Something more dangerous than both. Hope, perhaps. Then it was gone. The priest pronounced them husband and wife. In the main church, Graham Mercer was still shouting. Dominic led Clara back through the side door and into the aisle where his father's coffin waited beneath the lilies. The entire room turned toward them. Cole stared at Clara's hand first, then Dominic's face. His smile was gone. Of all the graveside insults, he said softly, "This may be your finest." Dominic did not answer. The church doors opened before he reached them. Graham Mercer stood at the back, soaked from the rain, flanked by two men who had the build of private security and the eyes of men paid to ignore conscience. His expensive suit clung to him. His hair had fallen out of place. That seemed to offend him more than anything else. His gaze found Clara. "There you are. Not thank God. Not are you hurt. There you are." As if she were an item misplaced. Clara's hand tightened around Dominic's. Dominic felt it and did not look down. Graham took one step forward. "Clara, come here. Now." Dominic stopped walking. The church went silent in a way even grief had not managed. Graham finally looked at him properly. Recognition moved across his face, then calculation, then the first thin line of fear. Dominic, Graham said carefully, "This is a misunderstanding." Dominic's voice carried without rising. "No, it is a wedding." Graham blinked. Clara lifted her hand. The gold ring caught the dim churchlight. Graham's face changed. For the first time since Clara had known him, he looked truly unprepared. "What did you do?" he asked her. Clara's pulse hammered in her throat, but her voice came out clear. "I left." Graham's eyes flashed. "You embarrassed me in front of 400 people." There it was again. Not heartbreak, not love. Cost. Clara looked at him. Really looked, and saw a man who had mistaken access for devotion. A man who believed anything he touched became his. A man who would have married her, used her, smiled beside her, corrected her in private and called it love, until she forgot the difference. She stepped closer to Dominic, not because she needed him to shield her, but because Graham needed to see she had moved. "You called me manageable," she said. Graham went still. Dominic's head turned slightly. Clara felt his attention settle on her, but she kept her eyes on Graham. "You said I made you look stable." Graham's jaw flexed. "Clara." "No. You do not get to say my name like that anymore." The words surprised even her. They came from somewhere low and old, somewhere that had been listening for 2 years and waiting for permission. Dominic's grip did not tighten. He did not interrupt. That helped. Clara lifted her chin. "I was never your bride. I was your cover." Graham looked around the church, suddenly aware of the audience. "This is absurd. She is in shock. She is not thinking clearly." Dominic smiled. It was a small thing, almost polite. Men in the pews shifted because they understood what that smile meant. Dominic said, "Careful." Graham swallowed. Dominic continued, "You are standing in my father's church during my father's funeral, speaking about my wife, as if she is a misplaced employee." Graham's face drained by degrees. "Your wife?" "Yes." Graham looked at the priest, then Patrick, then the ring. "This will not hold." Dominic stepped closer. "It already has." Graham tried to recover. He straightened his jacket, though it was ruined by rain. "Dominic, listen. We do business in the same city. I am sure we can find a solution that does not damage either of us." Clara almost laughed. Even now he thought the issue was business. Dominic's voice dropped. "You had a solution." She ran from it barefoot. Graham looked at Clara. His eyes were colder now. You will regret this." Before fear could reach her face, Clara answered, "I already regretted you." Cole made a low sound from the front pew. It might have been amusement. It might have been approval. Dominic gave one small nod. Two Rourke men moved from the side aisle. Graham saw them and stepped back. "This is not over." Dominic's voice was calm. "For you it is." The men guided Graham and his security toward the doors. Not roughly. They did not need roughness. The threat was in the gentleness, in the certainty, in the way no one in the church even considered stopping them. The doors closed behind him. Only then did Clara realize she was shaking. Dominic looked down at her. "You are bleeding." She followed his gaze to her heel. A thin red line marked the marble near her foot. Somehow, that was what almost undid her. Not the cheating, not the vows, not the new name. The blood, proof that she had run, proof that she had paid for it. "I need to call my parents," she said. "You will. I need my phone. You will have one. I need to know what happens now." Dominic glanced toward his father's coffin, then back at her. "Now we go home." Home. The word should not have sounded like a threat. Clara looked toward the closed church doors where Graham had vanished into the rain. Then she looked at Dominic Rourke, her husband by bargain, her shield by necessity, her newest danger by choice. Outside, thunder rolled over New Orleans. Dominic offered his arm. Clara stared at it for half a second. Then she took it. They walked out beneath the funeral bells past stone saints, washed dark by rain, past black cars waiting along the curb, past men who bowed their heads as Dominic passed. Clara stepped into the city again with a dead man behind her, a furious man hunting her and a living storm at her side. When the car door opened, she slid into the back seat and folded her hands in her lap so Dominic would not see them tremble. The ring pressed into her palm. Dominic sat across from her, silent, watchful, composed in a way that made her want to throw something just to see if he could crack. Through the tinted window, St. Augustine Church faded behind sheets of rain. Clara whispered, "You said your name would protect me." Dominic's eyes remained on her. "It will. And what protects me from you?" For the first time, he did not answer right away. The car pulled from the curb. The city moved around them in wet flashes of iron balconies, gas lamps, and river mist. Dominic leaned back, his face half shadowed by the dark glass. "You do," he said. Clara looked at him. He did not smile. "If you remember who you were when you ran." The words settled between them, quiet and dangerous. Clara turned toward the window and watched New Orleans blur past the hotel, the church, the life she had abandoned, all disappearing into rain. Ahead, beyond the old oaks and gated streets, the Rourke estate waited. The Rourke estate waited behind iron gates and ancient oaks half hidden from the street, like a secret New Orleans had agreed not to speak aloud. Clara saw it first through rain on the tinted glass. A long stone wall ran along the avenue, green vines crawling over it, black lanterns burning even in the afternoon gloom. The gates opened before the car stopped swinging inward with the slow confidence of something that had never once been refused. She sat very still. Dominic sat across from her, one hand resting on his knee, the other near his phone. His black suit had not wrinkled. Not after the funeral, not after the church, not after a wedding that should never have happened. The only sign that the day had touched him at all was the faint line of blood near his cuff. Not his blood, she thought. Maybe hers from when he had taken her hand. Outside, the car rolled up a gravel drive toward a white mansion set beneath enormous live oaks. Spanish moss hung from the branches like old smoke. The house had tall windows, wide columns, and balconies wrapped in black iron. It did not look built. It looked inherited, claimed, defended. Clara looked at it and felt her throat tighten. "So this is where monsters live," she said. Dominic's eyes lifted to her. Only the successful ones. She should not have laughed. It was barely a breath, but it escaped anyway. Maybe shock had finally started making strange choices on her behalf. The car stopped. A man opened the door before Clara could reach for it. Rain had softened into a mist, but the gravel shone wet and sharp. Clara gathered the torn front of her wedding dress and stepped out. Her bare foot hit the gravel. Pain snapped up her leg. She caught herself against the car jaw tightening before a sound could leave her mouth. Dominic was beside her instantly. "I can walk," she said. "You can bleed too." I noticed. Before she could argue, he slid one arm behind her knees and the other around her back. He lifted her as if she weighed nothing more than the ruined dress and bad decisions. Clara grabbed his shoulder on instinct. "Put me down. On the gravel I did not ask to be carried." "No," Dominic said, walking toward the stairs. "You asked for a door. This is the one you got." His voice was calm, but his arms were not careless. He held her securely without fumbling, without making a show of it. Somehow that made it more irritating. The front steps were wide, pale stone, slick with rain. A woman in a black dress opened the door before they reached it. Warm light spilled across the threshold. Dominic paused there, still holding Clara. For one strange second she remembered wedding traditions. A groom carrying his bride over the threshold. The thought was so absurd she almost hated it. Dominic looked down at her. Traditional, apparently. "Do not start." The corner of his mouth moved. He carried her inside. The foyer was all marble dark wood and old money. A chandelier hung overhead, its crystals catching gold light. Portraits lined the walls. Men in suits, women in pearls, children with solemn eyes. Generations of Rourkes staring down at Clara as if they had been waiting to judge her. 5 staff members stood in a neat line near the staircase. Dominic set Clara gently on the marble. Her feet touched the floor. Cold shot through her. He turned to the staff. "This is my wife, Clara Rourke." The name made every head dip. Dominic's voice did not rise, but it filled the hall. "She is the mistress of this house. Anything she needs, she gets. Anyone who forgets that will explain it to me." Clara felt the words settle around her like a velvet rope. Mistress of the house. Wife. Rourke. She looked down at the ring on her finger. Patrick Quinn's signet ring sat too loose. The crest turned inward against her palm. It did not feel like jewelry. It felt like evidence. A tall, older man stepped forward. Square jaw, silver at the temples, eyes that had learned to notice everything without seeming to look. "Mrs. Rourke," he said. "Patrick Quinn. I served Mr. Rourke's father for 27 years. Clara nodded because she could not think of a useful sentence. Dominic removed his suit jacket and handed it to one of the staff. "Have a room prepared for her. Clothes, shoes, anything practical, nothing white." Clara turned to him. "I can choose my own clothes. You have none here. I have clothes at my apartment. You are not going to your apartment today." The sentence landed too cleanly. Clara forgot the staff, forgot the room, forgot the old portraits watching from the walls. "I am not." Dominic looked at her fully. "No." Something inside her recoiled. She had heard that tone before from a different man in a different suit. "No. Not now. Not like that." Clara straightened, though her feet hurt. "I need my phone, my bag, my ID. My parents are probably losing their minds." Dominic reached into his pocket and held out his phone. "Call them." She looked at the phone, then at him. "That is not the same thing. It is the available thing." Her fingers closed around the device because pride was less urgent than her mother. Dominic's gaze dropped briefly to her bloody heel. "After the call, let someone clean that." "Do I get permission to breathe too?" Patrick Quinn's mouth twitched like he almost had a human reaction and thought better of it. Dominic only watched her. "If you need it." Clara wanted to throw his phone at him. Instead, she turned away. "Where can I call privately?" Patrick stepped forward. "This way, Mrs. Rourke." The guest room was larger than Clara's entire apartment. That was her first thought, and she hated herself for having it. The ceiling was high. The bed was enormous, dressed in cream linen. Tall windows looked out over a back garden where wet hedges curved around a stone fountain. Beyond the trees, if Clara leaned close enough to the glass, she could see a strip of gray river under the clouds. Patrick left her at the door with a first aid kit and a promise that someone would return with clothes. Clara sat on the edge of the bed and stared at Dominic's phone. She dialed her mother from memory. Helen answered before the first ring finished. "Clara." The sound of her mother's voice almost broke her. Clara closed her eyes. "Mom, I'm safe. Where are you? Graham said you ran. He said you were confused. Your father is driving around the city looking for you. We were about to call the police." "Do not call the police." A pause. "Clara." "What happened?" Clara looked at the ring. "I could not marry him." Helen went quiet. Then softly, "Did he hurt you?" The question went straight through the armor Clara had been trying to assemble. Not in a way that shows. Helen inhaled shakily. "Oh, baby, I'm safe," Clara said again, because if she said anything else, she might start crying and never stop. "I need you to tell Dad I'm safe." "Where are you?" Clara pressed her fingers to her forehead. "With Dominic Rourke." Silence. Not confusion. Recognition. Everyone in New Orleans knew the Rourke name. Some said it openly. Most did not. Helen's voice changed. "Clara, I married him." The words sounded impossible in the quiet room. On the other end of the line, something clattered. Maybe her mother had dropped the phone. Maybe Ray had taken it. Clara heard muffled voices, panic rising, then her father's voice came through rough and breathless. "Clara Ann, tell me you are joking." "I'm not." "What did he do?" "Dad, listen to me. I chose this." Even as she said it, the sentence wobbled under its own weight. Ray heard it. "You chose a Rourke 3 hours after running from your wedding. I chose not to go back to Graham." That silenced him. Clara wiped at her cheek and realized there were still streaks of dried mascara there. "I will explain everything. I promise. Just do not call Graham. Do not answer him. Do not let him in the restaurant." Ray's voice lowered. "Is he threatening you? He will try. Then come home." Clara looked around the room that was not hers. At the polished furniture, the folded towels, the locked world beyond the gates. "I cannot. Not tonight." Cannot or will not, Clara had no answer that would comfort him. "I love you," she whispered. "Tell Mom I love her." She ended the call before her father could hear the fear she had been swallowing all day. For a moment, she sat with Dominic's phone in both hands. Then the door opened without a knock. Clara stood so fast the pain in her heel flashed white. Dominic entered, and her whole body reacted before her mind caught up. He saw it. Of course he did. His gaze moved from her face to the phone. "Did you reach them?" "Yes." "Good. You do not enter my room without knocking." He stopped. The words hung there. Then he inclined his head slightly. "You are right. It was not an apology, not exactly, but it was close enough to surprise her." A woman entered behind him carrying a black garment bag and a shoebox. She kept her eyes lowered. Dominic did not look away from Clara. "Dinner is at 8. I'm not hungry." "You have had a long day. That usually makes people less interested in dining with strangers. This house eats together. This house sounds exhausting." Again that small movement at his mouth. "Usually." The woman placed the garment bag on the bed and left. Dominic turned to go. Clara spoke before he reached the door. "Why me?" He paused with one hand near the frame. "You were there." That is not an answer. It is the most honest one. She hated that too. "Convenient," she said. Dominic looked back. Yes, the word hit harder than it should have. She had known this was not romance. She had demanded it be a deal. Still hearing herself reduced to timing and utility scraped against the same wound Graham had opened. Useful, manageable, convenient, different men, different words, same shrinking room. Dominic's expression shifted, not softening, but sharpening. "You wanted a lie." "No," Clara said. "I wanted to know which kind of danger you are." He studied her for a long moment. "The kind that does not pretend to be safe." Then he left. This time he closed the door quietly. Clara stood in the center of the room until her breathing evened. Then she opened the garment bag. Black. Of course. A black dress, simple and expensive with clean lines and a neckline that made no apology. Beside it, black heels. Not bridal, not sweet, not soft. She almost refused to put it on out of principle. Then she caught her reflection in the mirror. The wedding dress was ruined. Mud at the hem, torn lace, one sleeve stained. She looked like the ghost of a woman who had been sacrificed and escaped the knife. Clara unfastened it herself. The silk fell to the floor with a tired whisper. She stepped out of it and did not look back for a moment. The shower ran hot enough to sting. She washed rain makeup, church smoke, and Graham Mercer's last fingerprints from her skin. She scrubbed until her arms flushed pink. When she stepped out, the mirror was fogged and the room smelled of steam instead of fear. She put on the black dress. It fit. That bothered her. The woman in the mirror was not the bride from the Mercer Hotel. She was pale, tired eyes, too bright hair damp around her shoulders. But she looked awake, sharper, like grief had not softened her but cut away something unnecessary. A knock came at the door. This time someone waited. "Yes?" A maid entered and glanced toward the dress on the floor. "Mrs. Rourke, should I take that?" Clara looked at the wedding gown. For 2 years she had been careful with Graham's things. His schedule, his temper, his image, his future. Even the dress had been chosen because it would photograph well beside him. "No," Clara said. "I will take it." The maid hesitated. To storage, Clara picked up the dress. To the fire. Outside, the rain had stopped. The back garden glowed under low lanterns. Wet leaves shone black-green. The air smelled of river water roses and smoke from a fire pit burning beneath a stone pergola. Dominic sat there with a glass of bourbon in one hand, sleeves rolled to his forearms. A shotgun rested against the side of his chair, its polished wood catching the firelight. Clara stopped at the edge of the pergola. He looked up. His gaze moved over the black dress, the damp hair, the wedding gown clutched in her hands. Something unreadable passed through his face. Going somewhere? Yes. Where? She walked past him to the fire. The heat touched her face. The gown hung from her hand, heavy with dried mud and old promises. For a second she saw herself as she had been that morning, standing in a hotel mirror, trying to convince herself dread was nerves. Then she opened her fingers. The dress fell into the flames. Tulle caught first, fast and hungry. Then lace curled inward. The silk blackened, folded, vanished. Fire climbed through the careful seams Graham had chosen, through the shape he had approved, through the costume he had mistaken for consent. Clara watched without blinking. Behind her, Dominic stood. She felt him before she heard him. That stillness, that attention. Did that help, he asked. No. The fire snapped. Then Clara said, "Yes." Dominic came to stand beside her, not too close, For once he did not touch. Clara stared into the flames. He called me manageable. Dominic's jaw shifted. I heard. I used to think being easy to love meant being easy to live with. Easy to correct. Easy to quiet. Easy to place somewhere and trust I would stay. Her voice stayed calm. That was the strange part. The words felt like they belonged to someone who had survived long enough to speak from a distance. Dominic looked at her profile, and now Clara turned from the fire. Now I think men call women manageable when they are afraid of what happens if we stop asking permission. Dominic's eyes held hers. The firelight made them look almost silver. Good, he said. That single word did something to the air between them. Clara did not like it. Before she could answer, Patrick appeared at the edge of the garden. Mr. Rourke. Dominic did not turn. Yes. Graham Mercer is at the front gate. 5 men with him. He says he wants his bride. Clara's stomach tightened, but she did not step back. Dominic finally looked away from her. Bring him to the front garden. Keep him outside. Patrick nodded and disappeared. Dominic reached for the shotgun. Clara stared at him. You are bringing that. He rested it over one shoulder. I was using it before. For what, clay pigeons? Of course. Dominic looked at her. You should stay inside. Clara laughed once without humor. I burned the dress. I am not hiding behind the curtains. This is not about courage. No, it is about Graham believing I still need someone to speak for me. Dominic's gaze sharpened. And do you? Clara stepped past him. Walk faster and find out. The front garden was lit by rain-wet lanterns and the glow from the mansion windows. Rourke men had formed a loose half-circle near the drive. Beyond them, Graham stood in a navy suit, jaw tight. Hair-damp face carefully arranged into concern. He saw Clara, and relief flashed across his face. Not relief that she was safe, relief that he had an audience. There she is, Graham said. Clara, come here. Dominic stopped on the bottom step. The shotgun rested lazily against his shoulder. Clara came down beside him. Graham looked at her dress, then the ring, then Dominic. His eyes hardened. This has gone far enough. Clara said nothing. Graham spread his hands. Clara had a breakdown. Anyone can see that. She was upset. She was emotional. You took advantage of a vulnerable woman during a family funeral, Dominic. That is a story neither of us wants in the papers. Dominic's voice was mild. You came to my home threatening my reputation with a headline, I came to retrieve my fiancé. Clara spoke then. Wife. Graham looked at her. What I am not your fiancé. His mouth tightened. You do not know what you are saying. There it is, Clara said softly. Graham blinked. That voice. That reasonable little voice. The one you use when you want everyone to think I am fragile. His eyes flicked to the men watching. Clara, stop. No. The word was small. It was also complete. Dominic's gaze moved to her, but he stayed silent. Clara stepped down one more stair. You do not want me back because you love me. You want the room to stop laughing. You want your investors to stop asking why your bride ran barefoot through the city. You want the story fixed. Graham's face flushed. I made you. No, Clara said. You used me. His mask slipped. If I had not put you beside me, you would still be some restaurant girl taking notes in cheap shoes. The garden went very still. Clara felt the insult strike, but it did not enter the way it would have yesterday. Dominic moved. One step only. Clara lifted a hand, not looking at him. He stopped. That mattered. She did not know why yet, but it did. Clara looked at Graham. My father's restaurant fed half your campaign donors before they knew your name. My cheap shoes walked into meetings you were too arrogant to prepare for. My notes saved contracts you almost lost because you thought charm could replace work. Graham stared at her. She smiled slightly. You did not make me. You benefited from me. For a heartbeat, Graham had no answer. Then his eyes turned mean. This marriage will never hold. You had no identification, no license, no legal clarity. Tomorrow morning my attorneys will bury this circus. Dominic finally came down the steps. The atmosphere changed with him. Graham. Just his name. Graham's mouth closed. Dominic stopped beside Clara. This is New Orleans. Half the city was built on paperwork signed after the fact. Graham swallowed. Dominic smiled without warmth. But if you need comfort, call the parish office in the morning. Then call city records. Then call your lawyer and ask him why your bride's last name changed before your suit dried. You cannot do that. Dominic leaned slightly closer. I already did. Graham looked at Clara again, and the rage in his eyes turned personal. You think he cares about you? You think you are special here? Clara felt Dominic beside her, silent and dangerous. Graham continued voice-cutting. You are a tool. That is all. He saw a desperate woman in a dress and used her before someone else could. The words found the bruise Dominic had made upstairs. Convenient. Clara's breath caught so quietly no one else should have heard it. Dominic did. His hand came to her waist. Clara stiffened. He leaned down, voice near her ear. Say no, and I stop. The shock of that question moved through her. Not a command. A choice. Graham watched furious and uncertain. Clara looked up at Dominic. For 10 seconds, she remembered the side chapel. The bargain. No touching. No pretending. No romance. Then she looked at Graham, at the man who thought every room could be arranged around his pride. She placed her hand flat against Dominic's chest. Not pushed away. Not yet. Dominic lowered his mouth to hers. The kiss was supposed to be a weapon. It was slow, controlled, public enough to humiliate Graham, careful enough not to trap her. Clara meant to stand still and let it happen like theater. Instead, something inside her answered. Her fingers curled once in Dominic's shirt. His breath changed, only slightly. But she felt it. When he pulled back, the space between them had altered. Graham's voice cracked across the garden. Clara, what the hell are you doing? Clara stepped away from Dominic before anyone else could notice she needed to. She looked at Graham. Leaving. Dominic turned his attention back to him. Go home, Mercer. This is not over. Dominic's face emptied of expression. It is if you want to keep breathing city air. Graham stared at him, then at Clara. For a moment, Clara thought he might say something final, something cruel enough to stay with her. Instead, he adjusted his cuffs with shaking fingers. This will cost you. Clara answered before Dominic could. It already did. Graham left with his men, the gravel crunching under their polished shoes. The gates opened, then closed. The sound echoed through the garden. Clara stood very still until the last car disappeared beyond the wall. Dominic turned toward her. She did not let him speak. Do not do that again. His eyes stayed on hers. The kiss. My choice. My body. My mouth. My life. If you need to prove something to another man, find another weapon. Dominic absorbed it. You kissed me back. The words were quiet, but they struck too close. Clara stepped up to him, anger rising because anger was easier than whatever else had happened. And you think that gives you rights? No. Good. She turned and walked toward the house. Her legs shook only after she reached the stairs. Inside the foyer was too bright, too polished, too full of old portraits and new consequences. Clara climbed the staircase, one hand trailing along the banister. At the top she paused and pressed her fingers to her mouth. Her lips still felt warm. She hated that most of all. In her room the maid had removed the ruined shoes and left fresh towels, a nightgown and a silk robe folded at the foot of the bed. Everything black again. Clara stared at them and let out a tired laugh that had no joy in it. The window looked down over the front drive. Dominic still stood in the garden. He had not moved. Rain began again, soft, at first silver under the lanterns. He looked up toward her window as if he had known exactly where she would be. Clara stepped back before he could see her clearly. Then she remembered who she had been when she ran. She stepped forward again. Dominic was still watching. Clara held his gaze through the glass. Neither of them moved. The rain thickened between them, blurring his face, the garden, the iron gates beyond. Behind those gates, Graham Mercer was still out there, wounded and dangerous. Inside them, Dominic Rourke was something worse than safe. And Clara, wearing black in a house that had already started calling her by a new name, realized the bargain had only just begun. By morning, the rain had stopped, but the house still sounded like weather. Clara woke to unfamiliar light sliding across an unfamiliar ceiling. For a few seconds, she did not move. She listened to the low pulse of the mansion around her. Doors opening somewhere below. Footsteps in the hall. A cart rolling over polished wood. Men speaking in voices trained to stay quiet. Then she turned her hand on the sheets and felt the ring. Dominic Rourke's name was still on her finger. No, not his ring, she reminded herself. Patrick's ring. Borrowed gold, borrowed protection, borrowed life. She sat up slowly. The room looked different in daylight. Less like a dream, more like a decision someone else had made. Her wedding dress was gone. The black dress from last night hung neatly over a chair cleaned of smoke. At the foot of the bed lay folded clothes, all new, all dark. Black trousers, black silk blouse, black dress, black sweater. Even the shoes were black, lined up beside the wardrobe like quiet instructions. Clara walked to the closet and opened it. More black. She stared at the rows of expensive fabric and felt something cold stir under her ribs. Graham had dressed control as concern. Dominic dressed it better. She pulled out the plainest dress she could find, one with long sleeves and a high neckline, and put it on because her own clothes were still across the city in an apartment she was no longer allowed to visit. Her heel had been bandaged while she slept. She did not remember falling asleep. She remembered watching Dominic through the rain, then sitting on the edge of the bed, then nothing. A knock came at the door. This time, whoever stood outside waited. Yes, the maid from yesterday opened it a few inches. "Good morning, Mrs. Rourke. Breakfast is being served downstairs. Is Mr. Rourke there?" "No, ma'am. He left early for a meeting at the docks." Of course he had. Clara almost smiled. Dominic Rourke married a woman during his father's funeral, kissed her in front of her former fiancé, locked her inside a mansion, and still made it to work before breakfast. "Who is downstairs?" The maid hesitated. "Mr. Cole." That smile died before it reached Clara's mouth. Wonderful. The dining room sat at the back of the house, facing the garden through tall French doors. Morning light hit the long table in pale strips. Silverware gleamed. Coffee steamed in a porcelain pot. A bowl of oranges sat untouched in the center, as if someone had arranged color there on purpose. Cole Rourke lounged at the far end in a white shirt open at the throat sleeves, rolled dark hair damp like he had just showered or just come in from trouble. He had a newspaper in one hand and a glass of champagne in the other. He looked up when Clara entered. "Well," he said, "the bride survived the night." Clara crossed to the coffee without waiting for invitation. Disappointed? Not exactly. He watched as she poured. "You look less haunted today. I feel less polite. That happens in this house." Clara took the seat opposite him far enough away to make the length of the table useful. Cole folded the newspaper. "I heard Mercer came to the gate last night. You heard I was upstairs. I saw enough. You did not come down. My brother had it handled." Clara lifted her cup. "Did he?" Cole's smile widened, but his eyes sharpened. "There she is." Clara said nothing. Cole leaned back, studying her the way people studied cards they had not expected to be dealt. "Has Dominic told you why he really married you?" The coffee paused near her mouth. "He needed a wife. That is the clean version." Clara set the cup down. Cole's voice turned softer, which somehow made it worse. "Our father left everything to the first son who married and produced a legitimate Rourke heir. The company, the estate, the voting control, the docks, the parts of the family business no one writes down." Clara kept her face still. Cole noticed the effort. "Do not look so surprised. You knew there had to be a price. I knew there was a reason. Reason is what men call a price when they do not want women checking the receipt. That one almost got through." Clara folded her hands in her lap. "And you wanted to be first." Cole's smile thinned. "I was first. By what, a few minutes, 6. How tragic for you." The room went quiet. Then Cole laughed. It was low and real and brief. "I see why he brought you home. He brought me home because I was convenient." Cole's eyes stayed on hers. "No, sweetheart. He brought you home because you were convenient. He kept watching you because you were not." Clara did not like the small, traitorous movement that caused in her chest. Cole stood and walked toward the sideboard. He took an orange, turned it in his hand, then picked up a knife from the fruit tray. "Be careful with Dominic," he said. Clara watched the blade slide under the peel. "That sounds almost brotherly." "It is not." "Then what is it?" Cole cut a long strip of orange rind, slow and neat, a warning from someone who knows him. Dominic does not hold things loosely. Not power, not grudges, not people. Clara rose. "Good thing I am not a thing." Cole looked at her over the orange. "No," he said. "You are starting to look like a problem." Dominic's study smelled like leather ink and rain-soaked wood. Clara entered without waiting after Patrick opened the door. Dominic stood behind his desk with a phone to his ear. Jacket off white shirt, crisp black tie, loosened just enough to prove he was human, only under protest. His eyes lifted when he saw her. He ended the call. "Good morning." Was it? One eyebrow moved slightly. "Breakfast with Cole." He told me about the will. Dominic's face did not change, but the room changed anyway. Patrick stepped back from the door and closed it from the outside. Clara walked to the desk. Marriage first, heir next, empire after. Dominic looked at her. "Yes, that was the part you left out in the church. The church was busy." She laughed once, sharp and humorless. "You asked a terrified woman to marry you while her ex was pounding on the doors, and somehow the room being busy is your defense." "You were not terrified." Clara stared at him. Dominic's voice lowered. "You were cornered. There is a difference." She hated that he had seen that clearly. She hated more that he was right. "You used me." "Yes." The answer hit the room cleanly. No apology, no softness, no excuse. Clara gripped the edge of the chair in front of the desk. "You could at least hesitate before saying it. I will not insult you with a lie." "How noble." "Not noble, practical. Everything is practical with you. Most things are." "What am I then?" Dominic came around the desk slow enough not to startle her, close enough to make the air tighten. "My wife. That is a legal word. It is also a dangerous one in this city. Convenient. Wife. Untouchable. You have many names for a woman you met yesterday. Dominic stopped in front of her. And Graham had one. Manageable. Neither of them said it. Clara looked away, first furious that the word still had teeth. Dominic's voice changed. Your parents are coming to dinner tonight. She looked back at him. What? They need to see you. They need to believe you are safe. I am safe. You are safer here than anywhere Graham can reach. That is not the same thing. No, Dominic said. It is not. The honesty disarmed her more than an argument would have. He returned to his desk and opened a folder. Graham is already telling people you were unstable. His attorney has made calls. He wants the marriage challenged before it becomes useful. To you. To both of us. Clara crossed her arms. Do not make my survival sound like a shared investment. Dominic looked up. It is. She felt the walls move closer. What else? He slid a document across the desk. Clara did not touch it. What is that? The note on your father's restaurant. Her whole body went still. Dominic waited. Clara picked it up slowly. She recognized the name of the lending company. She recognized the amount. She recognized her father's signature at the bottom, pressed hard into the line as if strength could turn debt into dignity. Her voice came out very quiet. How did you get this? I bought it. The paper trembled before she could stop her hand. You bought my father's debt. I removed it from Graham and put it under you. Dominic said nothing. Clara looked up. You said my family would be protected. They are. No. They are transferred. A muscle moved in his jaw. I do not threaten restaurant owners. You threaten everyone. You just choose different voices. That landed. She saw it in the stillness that followed. Dominic came around the desk again, but this time Clara stepped back before he could get too close. He noticed. He stopped. Good. Your father owes nothing as long as this arrangement holds, he said. And if it does not, his eyes stayed on hers. Then we discussed terms. Clara almost smiled. It felt like barbed wire. You really do not hear yourself. I hear everything. No. You hear strategy. You hear risk. You hear leverage. You do not hear what it sounds like to a woman who just ran from a man who used her family as a leash. Dominic's expression altered, then not much, but enough. The line of his mouth lost some of its certainty. Clara set the document on his desk. My parents are coming here tonight because I asked them to, not because you are staging me like proof. Dominic studied her. Then ask them. I will. And Clara. She turned at the door. Make them believe you chose this. The anger rose again, hot and clean. I did choose it. Her voice did not shake. I am still deciding what that means. The kitchen was the warmest room in the house. Copper pans hung above a stone island. The air smelled like garlic butter and something rich simmering low on the stove. A compact man with dark hair and severe eyebrows stood over a tray of oysters like they had personally offended him. He looked up when Clara entered. Mrs. Rourke, you are the chef, Giorgio. She saw the menu card beside the sink. Oysters, foie gras, lamb, French wine, chocolate torte with gold leaf. Clara picked it up and stared. Absolutely not. Giorgio blinked. Excuse me. My father owns a restaurant. My mother hates food she cannot identify. If you serve this, they will think Dominic is trying to remind them they are poor. Giorgio's face went carefully blank. Mr. Rourke approved the menu. Mr. Rourke wants my parents comfortable. These are not the same thing. The chef folded his arms. What would you suggest? Clara looked around the kitchen. The smell of garlic helped her breathe. braised short ribs, roasted carrots, cornbread with honey butter if you can manage it without making it look like a sculpture, gumbo but no shellfish. My mother is allergic. Peach cobbler for dessert. Giorgio stared at her like she had asked him to cook over a campfire. Short ribs need hours. Then we should start. His eyes narrowed. For a moment, Clara thought he would refuse. Then he reached for a towel and slung it over his shoulder. No shellfish. No shellfish. Your father likes spice. My father thinks cayenne is a love language. Giorgio's mouth twitched. I can work with that. Clara turned to leave, then paused. And, Giorgio, yes, Mrs. Rourke, do not make the plates too pretty. He looked offended. She smiled for the first time that morning. Make them good. By noon, the house had shifted around her. Flowers changed from stiff white arrangements to softer cream and yellow. The dining room table lost 2 sets of unnecessary forks. Clara moved the seating so her father would not feel trapped between Dominic and Cole. She called her mother from the new phone. Patrick handed her a sleek black thing already programmed with numbers she had not given anyone. Helen answered carefully. Clara, it is me. Whose phone is this? Mine now, apparently. There was a pause. Are you all right? Clara looked across the sitting room to where Patrick was pretending not to listen. I want you and Dad to come to dinner tonight, baby. I know how insane that sounds. But I need you to see me. I need Dad to see me. Not through Graham. Not through rumors. Helen's voice softened. Do you want us there? Yes, that much was true. Then we will come. After the call, Clara stood by the window looking out at the front drive. Patrick approached quietly. Mrs. Rourke, you can call me Clara when Dominic is not around. His eyes flicked to her amused in a very controlled way. I would rather survive the week. She almost laughed. Patrick, I need to go to my apartment. No. The answer was instant. Clara turned. Was that from you or from him? Both. I need my ID. Clothes. My own things. I can have someone retrieve them. No. Patrick's face softened by a fraction. You are not a prisoner. Then why does everyone keep saying no? He had no immediate answer. That was answer enough. Clara walked past him through the hall into the back garden. The afternoon was damp and heavy, the sky low again. At the end of the drive, the gate stood closed. 2 men waited beside it. She did not get far. One stepped forward. Mrs. Rourke, I am sorry. Mr. Rourke left instructions. Of course he did. She turned back toward the house before anger could become humiliation. Cole was in the kitchen when she entered, leaning against the counter, eating an apple with a knife. He had changed into dark trousers and a white shirt, though the shirt was mostly unbuttoned because apparently the Rourke men treated modesty like a negotiable debt. You look like you lost an argument with the gate, he said. I need a ride. No. That is popular today. Cole cut another slice. Ask Dominic. I would rather swallow glass. Messy. Clara stepped closer. I need to get my things from my apartment. Your brother's men will not let me leave. Cole chewed slowly. And you came to me because you enjoy making his life worse. His smile arrived slowly. Careful, bride. Flattery works. That was not flattery. No, that is why it worked. 20 minutes later, Clara was in the passenger seat of Cole's black convertible as it shot through the gates before anyone gathered the courage to stop him. Wind tore through her hair. The city opened around them, wet streets, iron balconies, magnolia trees, old brick buildings, sweating history. Cole drove too fast with one hand on the wheel and the other resting loose near the gear shift. You always kidnap your brother's wife before lunch, Clara asked. Only the interesting ones. I am not being kidnapped. No. You are escaping with style. She looked at him. I am coming back. Are you telling me or yourself? She faced the road. Drive. Her apartment was small, second-floor, narrow stairs, one window box where Basil had died twice and still smelled faintly green after rain. Clara unlocked the door and stepped inside. For 1 second she could not breathe. Everything was exactly as she had left it. A mug in the sink, a book open on the couch, bills clipped to the fridge, a blue sweater over the chair. Her old life, sitting patiently unaware, it had been abandoned. Cole entered behind her and looked around. This is yours. Yes, it smells like cinnamon. I bake when I cannot sleep. That often? She did not answer. She went to the bedroom and packed quickly. Jeans, sweaters, underwear, spare ID. A framed photo of her parents outside the restaurant. A small silver necklace her grandmother had given her. She moved with purpose because if she slowed down, the apartment would start asking questions. When she came back out, Cole stood near the bookshelf holding a worn paperback. You read romance? Clara snatched it from his hand. You break into women's shelves. I was invited. You were tolerated. He grinned. Outside, a car door closed. Clara froze. Cole's smile vanished. He moved to the window and looked down. Stay behind me. The words were not playful. Clara set the bag down slowly. In the stairwell, footsteps climbed. A knock came at the door. Not Graham. Graham would have used her name like a hook. Cole opened the door before Clara could protest. 2 men stood outside. One looked past Cole and found Clara. Miss Whitaker. Mr. Mercer wants to speak with you. The old name made her stomach turn. Cole's voice went flat. There is no Miss Whitaker here. The man stepped forward and reached for Clara. It happened too fast. Cole caught his wrist twisted and drove his fist into the man's jaw. The sound was ugly and final. The second man reached inside his jacket. Cole had a gun out first. Clara had not even seen where it came from. His eyes were no longer charming. They were cold and bright and almost pleased. Touch her again, Cole said, and my brother will be the merciful one. The man on the floor groaned. Cole kept the gun steady. Go back to Mercer. Tell him Clara Rourke is not taking appointments. The second man dragged the first down the stairs. Clara stood very still. Cole tucked the gun away and picked up her bag. You okay? She looked at him. Really looked. For someone who claims not to be my ally, you are very committed. He walked past her. Do not confuse family pride with affection. I would not dare. But in the car she noticed his knuckles were split. She pulled a napkin from her bag and dropped it in his lap. Your hand is bleeding. Cole looked at the napkin, then at her. Worried about me? No. Blood on leather is tacky. He laughed so suddenly that it startled them both. When they reached the estate, Dominic was waiting on the front steps. The sight of him stole whatever fragile ease the drive had made. He stood with his hands in his pockets, jacket dark against the white stone face, composed eyes not composed at all. Cole parked lazily. Ah, he said. There is the storm. Clara stepped out with her bag. Dominic came down 2 steps. His gaze moved to Cole's bleeding hand, then Clara's face, then the bag over her shoulder. Inside, he said. Clara lifted her chin. No. The word hung between them. Cole leaned against the car like a man enjoying theater. Dominic did not look at him. Clara. If you want a conversation, have one here. His eyes sharpened. You left the estate against my instruction. I went to get my things. With Cole, he had a car, he had a motive. So do you. For a second, no one spoke. Then Patrick appeared in the doorway and said quietly, Mr. and Mrs. Whitaker will arrive in an hour. That changed everything. Dominic's face closed. He looked at Clara. Get ready for dinner. She walked past him into the house without lowering her eyes. At 8, The dining room glowed with candlelight. Ray and Helen Whitaker arrived stiff with worry and dressed in their Sunday best. Ray wore a navy suit that pulled slightly at the shoulders. Helen clutched her purse with both hands. When Clara entered, her mother crossed the room and hugged her so tightly Clara almost lost her breath. Ray stood back looking at her face like he was searching for bruises no one else could see. Then he looked at Dominic. The room changed again. Dominic stepped forward. "Mr. Whitaker. Mrs. Whitaker. Thank you for coming." Ray did not take his offered hand right away. "What did you do to my daughter?" The staff went still. Clara opened her mouth. Dominic answered first quietly. "I married her badly." Ray blinked. Dominic continued. "In haste, under pressure, without the respect your family deserved. That is what I did." Clara stared at him. So did Ray. Dominic did not look at her. "But I did not force her. I did not drug her. I did not take her from Graham Mercer. She ran before I ever saw her." Helen's eyes filled. "Clara." Clara reached for her mother's hand. "I ran because I heard the truth." Dinner began carefully. At first, every sound seemed too loud. Fork against plate. Wine poured into glasses. Chairs shifting. Ray watched Dominic like a father deciding whether prison was worth it. Helen watched Clara. Cole unfortunately arrived 10 minutes late and kissed Helen's hand like a villain in a play. "Mrs. Whitaker, now I see where Clara gets the eyes." Helen looked startled. Ray looked ready to stab him with a butter knife. "Clara said, 'Cole, sit down before my father decides you are the easiest Rourke to kill.'" Cole grinned. "I like her." Dominic said, "No one asked. The short ribs were perfect. That helped." Ray took one bite and looked toward the kitchen door. "Who made this?" Clara smiled. "Giorgio. Under strict emotional supervision." For the first time all night, Ray's mouth moved like it wanted to smile. Helen touched Clara's hand under the table. "You changed the menu. I knew what you would like." Dominic watched that small exchange from the head of the table. Clara felt him seeing something he had not known to look for. The way Helen cut Ray's meat when he was too distracted to eat. The way Ray checked Clara's water glass without thinking. The way ordinary love moved quietly without needing to announce ownership. Halfway through dinner, Ray set down his fork. "I want to know about the loan." Clara went still. Dominic wiped his mouth with a napkin and set it down. "I bought it from Mercer's lender." Ray's face flushed. "You had no right." "No," Dominic said. "I had the means." "That's supposed to comfort me, no?" Dominic leaned forward slightly. "It is cleared." Ray frowned. "What do you mean, cleared?" "The debt is gone." Clara looked at him sharply. That had not been in the study. He had said her father owed him. Now he was saying something else. Dominic kept his eyes on Ray. "There will be paperwork tomorrow. No lien, no interest, no leverage." Ray's voice roughened. Why? Dominic looked at Clara then. The room seemed to narrow to that glance. "Because your daughter asked me not to put my hand where Graham's had been." Clara forgot how to breathe for 1 second. Cole's smile faded. Helen looked between them, seeing more than Clara wanted seen. Ray sat back slowly. "I still do not like you." Dominic nodded. "That is reasonable." Clara had to look down at her plate to hide the sudden dangerous urge to smile. The rest of dinner moved easier. Not easy. Easier. Ray told a story about Clara at 12 reorganizing the restaurant pantry because the cooks kept losing invoices. Helen described Clara baking peach cobbler after school and falling asleep at the table with flour in her hair. Cole listened with interest he pretended not to have. Dominic listened silently, and Clara felt each piece of her old life entering the room like witnesses. By dessert, Helen reached across the table and touched Dominic's hand. "Take care of her." Clara expected him to say he would, expected possession, promise, performance. Instead, Dominic looked at Clara. "She is learning to take care of herself." Then he added softer, "I will stand where she lets me." The room quieted. Clara looked at him, and something inside her shifted despite every warning she had given herself. After dinner, Ray hugged her hard at the door. "You call me if you want to come home. I will. No matter the hour." "I know." Helen kissed Clara's cheek. "You are different." Clara swallowed. "Bad different." Her mother brushed hair from her face. "No. Awake different." When the front door closed behind them, the house felt larger. Cole disappeared without a joke. Patrick spoke quietly to the staff. Clara stood in the foyer, arms wrapped around herself, staring at the door her parents had just walked through. Dominic came to stand beside her, leaving space between them. For once, the space felt intentional instead of cold. "You did well," he said. Clara looked ahead. "So did you. That surprises you?" "Yes." His mouth almost curved. "Good." She turned to him. "Why did you clear the debt?" Dominic looked toward the dark windows. "Because you were right." The words were simple, too simple for the effect they had. Clara held his gaze. "Do not make a habit of that. I might get used to it." Now the corner of his mouth did move. "Dangerous." "Yes," she said. "I am starting to think I might be." For a moment, neither of them looked away. Then Patrick entered from the hall carrying a silver tray with a sealed envelope. "Mr. Rourke," he said. "This was delivered by courier." Dominic took it, broke the seal, and read. The small warmth in his face disappeared. Clara saw Graham Mercer's name printed at the top before Dominic folded the paper. Her stomach tightened. Dominic looked at Patrick. "Call the attorney." Then his eyes came back to Clara. On the table beneath his hand, beside the envelope, lay the embossed invitation for the Rourke Harbor Foundation Gala. The invitation on the table looked innocent until Clara saw Dominic's face. Cream paper, black ink, the Rourke crest pressed deep at the top. The kind of invitation people kept not because it was pretty, but because being invited meant something. The Rourke Harbor Foundation Gala, Saturday evening, the Beaumont Hotel ballroom, black tie. Benefactors, judges, donors, dock executives, city officials, and old families who smiled with pearls on and knives hidden under history. Beside it sat the letter from Graham Mercer's attorney. Dominic did not hand it to her, so Clara reached for it herself. His hand came down over the paper before she could touch it. "Don't." She looked at his fingers, then up at him. "That word keeps finding you." His eyes stayed on hers. "It's a legal threat. It has my name in it. Not anymore." Clara's jaw tightened. "That is not funny." "I wasn't trying to be." Patrick stood near the edge of the foyer, silent, waiting for instruction. He had the stillness of a man who had watched too many bad nights begin with paper. Dominic lifted his hand from the letter. Clara picked it up. Graham's attorney had written in polished language, but the meaning underneath was ugly. Clara Whitaker had been distressed. Clara Whitaker had entered an improper marriage under emotional pressure. Clara Whitaker was possibly being isolated from her family. Clara Whitaker might not have understood what she was consenting to. Every sentence dressed her like a victim and tied the ribbon with Graham's name. Clara read it twice. The first time she felt heat. The second time she felt calm. "He wants me small again," she said. Dominic's voice was low. "He wants you useful again." Clara folded the letter carefully and set it back on the tray. "And what do you want?" Dominic did not answer fast enough. That was an answer in itself. Clara looked at the gala invitation. This event matters. Yes, Graham will be there. He'll try. Let him. Dominic's eyes sharpened. No. Clara turned to him fully. You said I needed my parents to believe I chose this. You said I needed the city to believe it too. I cannot do that from behind your gates while your lawyers speak for me. His expression did not change, but the air around him did. Graham Mercer is not the man you debate in public. No, Clara said. He is a man who depends on women staying too embarrassed to contradict him. Patrick's gaze flicked toward Dominic. Dominic noticed and ignored it. Clara picked up the gala invitation. I'm going. You were always going. No, I mean I am going as more than your wife. Dominic's mouth set. What does that mean? It means I want to see the guest list, the donor list, the program, the seating chart, the contracts, the vendors, every speech written for that room. Patrick's expression changed almost imperceptibly. Dominic stared at her. That is a foundation gala, not a restaurant dinner? Good. I already proved I can fix dinner. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Dominic took the invitation from her hand, looked at it once, and handed it back. Patrick will bring you the files. Patrick blinked. Clara blinked too. Dominic looked at both of them as if surprise bored him. You wanted the work. Do it. Then he walked into his study and closed the door. Clara stood in the foyer with the invitation in her hand and Graham's letter on the tray behind her. Patrick cleared his throat. I'll have the files brought to the sitting room. Clara looked toward the closed study door. Was that permission or a test? Patrick's mouth twitched. With Mr. Rourke, those are often the same thing. The files arrived in 3 boxes. By midnight, Clara had covered the sitting room table with paper. The original gala plan was expensive cold and perfect for people who confused generosity with being seen giving money. The centerpieces cost more than her apartment rent. The dinner menu looked like it had been designed to intimidate anyone who grew up eating at a kitchen table. The speech drafted for Dominic praised legacy strength, private enterprise, and civic responsibility without once mentioning a human being. Clara read it and set it aside. No. Patrick looked up from the chair across from her. No to which part? All of it? You may want to be more specific. She leaned back and rubbed her eyes. This foundation is supposed to support poor families, correct? Yes. Scholarships, emergency medical support, widow funds, legal assistance after workplace injuries? Yes. Then why does this gala feel like a room full of wealthy people congratulating themselves for knowing poor people exist? Patrick looked at her for a long moment. Then he closed the folder in his lap. Evelyn Rourke used to say something similar. Clara's hand stilled. Dominic's mother, Patrick, nodded. She started the foundation quietly. Seamus made it public when he realized respectable charity opened doors that fear could not. Clara looked toward the dark windows. What was she like? Patrick's face softened with memory, but only a little. Men like him did not let grief sit down unless they trusted the room. Gentle when she could afford it. Steel when she could not. She knew every dock worker's wife by name. Sent doctors to homes before anyone asked. Paid school fees through third parties so fathers could keep their pride. She hated applause. That explains why the speech does not mention her. Seamus did not enjoy sharing rooms with ghosts. And Dominic Patrick was quiet. Dominic stopped saying her name after she died. Clara looked at the files again. There it was. The thing the gala was missing. Not money, not power. A heart someone had buried because it made the family look vulnerable. She pulled the speech toward her and picked up a pen. Then we are saying her name. Patrick sat very still. Dominic may object. Clara began crossing out lines. He left me in charge. The next morning, Dominic found her in the sitting room, barefoot on the rug, surrounded by folders, note cards, seating charts, and 3 cups of cold coffee. Morning light came through the windows and caught her hair where it had come loose from its pins. He stood in the doorway. "You did not sleep." Clara did not look up. "I have slept plenty in my life, most of it with my eyes open." Dominic came closer and picked up the original program. A moment passed, then another. "What is this? A better event?" He turned a page. "You removed the champagne tower. It looked like something a villain would stand beside." He turned another. "You changed the keynote. It was hollow. You added a tribute to my mother." Clara finally looked up. The room seemed to narrow. She started the foundation. Dominic's face closed. "Who told you that, Patrick?" Dominic looked toward the hall as if Patrick might appear just so he could be executed politely. Clara stood. "This foundation has her fingerprints all over it. The scholarships, the medical fund, the emergency rent grants, the women's legal support. That is not your father's work. That is hers. You do not know anything about my mother." "No," Clara said. "But I know when a woman has done the labor and a man's name is on the plaque." That hit. Dominic looked back at the program. His voice dropped. "You are crossing into things that are not yours." Clara stepped closer. "Then tell me where the line is." He lifted his eyes. She held them. "Is it your mother?" "Your family, the foundation, the business, the wife you married because she was convenient." A muscle moved in his jaw. "Clara." "No. You gave me the files. You told me to do the work. I am doing it. If you wanted a quiet woman in a black dress, you should have chosen one before I ran into your church." Silence expanded between them. Then Dominic set the program down with careful control. "The tribute stays short." Clara did not smile. "Fine. No photographs of her. Fine. No sentimental music." "Dominic." "What?" "It is a charity gala, not a hostage exchange." His mouth almost moved. Almost. Then his phone rang. He looked at the screen and answered. Clara watched his face turn colder by degrees. When he ended the call, the warmth that had nearly existed was gone. "Graham has pushed the petition. He is claiming I'm restricting your movement and blocking contact with your family." Clara folded her arms. "My parents were here last night. He will say they were pressured." "Of course he will. He also requested a wellness interview with you through a friendly detective." Clara felt the old anger coil again. Friendly to him. "Yes." Dominic put the phone away. "I'll handle it." "No." His eyes lifted. She heard herself more clearly this time. "No, Dominic. You will not handle me out of this." His gaze hardened. "That is not what I said. It is what you meant. You want to sit in a room with Graham's detective and hope honesty beats influence. I want to stop letting Graham write my condition for me." Dominic stepped closer. "You do not know how ugly this can get." Clara's voice softened, which made it sharper. "I was engaged to him. I know exactly how ugly pretty men can get when a room believes them first." Dominic stopped. There was something in his face then that looked almost like pain, but it vanished before she could name it. "Tell me what you need," he said. The sentence surprised her. Clara took a breath. "A lawyer who works for me, not you." His eyes held hers. "Done. A phone Graham cannot trace. You have it. My parents protected without being watched like suspects. Done. And access to Rourke Maritime contract records connected to Mercer Logistics. That one changed the room." Dominic's head tilted slightly. "Because Graham does not throw legal threats unless he is hiding something louder." Dominic looked at her for a long moment. Then he opened the study door and called Patrick. "Get her a desk." By Friday, Clara had learned 2 things. The first was that Rourke Maritime looked clean from a distance and complicated up close. The second was that Graham Mercer had built his confidence on the assumption that no one would expect Clara to understand the machinery behind him. She sat in a temporary office near Dominic's study with vendor lists, shipping schedules, insurance documents, and archived emails. She knew logistics. Graham had made sure of that. For 2 years, she had managed his calendar, prepared his briefings, caught his mistakes, and translated chaos into order while he accepted praise for being decisive. Now his habits betrayed him. He favored shell vendors with names just different enough to miss if you read too fast. He delayed payments before board meetings to create leverage. He overbooked docs, then blamed labor. He used charm in person and threats through assistants. His cruelty had patterns. So did his accounting. Clara found the first discrepancy at 2 in the afternoon, the second at 4. By evening she had a chain. Dominic came into her office just as she pinned the last printed email to the corkboard Patrick had found for her. He stopped in the doorway. The wall was covered with dates, names, arrows, invoices, and port numbers. Clara turned with a marker in her hand. Graham is sabotaging your shipments through 3 shell vendors tied to Mercer Logistics. He delayed a customs release last month and blamed one of your dock supervisors. That supervisor was demoted. Dominic's face sharpened. Name: Luis Ortega. Dominic looked at Patrick, who had appeared behind him. Patrick nodded once and disappeared. Clara tapped the board. He is also moving money through an event vendor on the gala list. Dominic came closer. Which vendor? Magnolia Sound and Stage. He looked at the paper. That contract came through Cole. Clara went still. Dominic noticed. So did I, he said. Neither of them moved for a beat. Then Clara said, Do you think Cole is working with Graham? Dominic's eyes stayed on the board. I think Cole likes making fire and then acting surprised by smoke. That is not an answer. It is the safest one. Clara capped the marker. Do not accuse him without proof. Dominic looked at her. Protecting my brother now, I am protecting the facts. His mouth tightened. Facts do not flirt with you in kitchens. There it was. Clara stared at him. You are jealous. No. That was quick. I am not jealous of Cole. Of course not. You are simply irritated that another man spoke to your temporary wife near Fruit. Dominic stepped close enough that she could smell his cologne clean and dark under the paper dust of the office. You think he is harmless because he makes you laugh? No, Clara said. I think you are angry because he does. That silence was different from all the others. Dominic's eyes moved over her face, slow and controlled. Stay away from him. Ask me. His expression hardened. What do not order me? Ask me. The air tightened. For a second, Clara thought he would refuse out of pure instinct. Then he said very quietly, Stay away from Cole. That is still an order. His jaw worked. Please. The word sounded like it had been dragged out of him with a blade. Clara should not have felt anything. She did. I will be careful, she said. That is not the same thing. No, it is the honest thing. Saturday night, the Beaumont Hotel ballroom glittered like a lie told by candlelight. Crystal chandeliers hung above round tables dressed in ivory linen. Jazz moved through the room, soft and low. Waiters crossed the floor with silver trays. Women wore diamonds that looked like inheritance. Men spoke in polished voices about charity, shipping justice, and weather while measuring alliances over the rims of their glasses. Clara stood outside the ballroom doors in an emerald gown. Not black. She had chosen it herself. The dress fit close through the waist and fell clean to the floor, the color deep enough to look almost alive under the lights. Her hair was pinned low. Her grandmother's silver necklace rested at her throat. Patrick's signet ring had been replaced that afternoon by a proper wedding band Dominic had placed in a velvet box on her desk without comment. She had worn it without comment, too. Dominic stood beside her in a black tuxedo, his expression unreadable. He saw the necklace. That is not from the house. No. Good. She looked at him. Good. His eyes met hers. You should have things here that are yours. For a moment, the hallway noise faded. Then the ballroom doors opened. Every head turned. Dominic offered his arm. Clara looked at it. This time she took it because she wanted the room to see them enter together. The whispers began before they reached the first table. Clara Rourke, the runaway bride, Mercer's former fiancée, Dominic's sudden wife, the woman at the center of a legal rumor spreading faster than good manners could contain. Clara smiled like none of it touched her. Dominic leaned slightly closer. Breathe. I am. Not enough. I would breathe more if half the room were not trying to decide if I was kidnapped. The other half is trying to decide if you were worth it. Clara glanced up at him, and his gaze moved over her face. They are late. She looked away before her expression betrayed her. Across the room, Graham Mercer stood near the bar with Vanessa Pike on his arm. He wore black. She wore silver. They looked arranged by someone with money and no imagination. Graham saw Clara. His smile appeared slowly. Dominic felt her notice before she moved. Clara, I see him. Do you want to leave? She looked at Graham, then at the room, then at the stage where the foundation crest waited behind the podium. No. Graham approached 15 minutes later, of course, when Dominic had been pulled into a conversation with the mayor and a federal judge. Clara stood near the silent auction table checking a misplaced bid card. She sensed Graham before he spoke. Some men carried cologne. Graham carried entitlement. Emerald, he said. That is new. Clara did not turn right away. It is a color, Graham. They existed before you approved ivory. He stopped beside her, smiling for anyone watching. You look well. You sound disappointed. His smile tightened. Vanessa hovered a few feet behind him, bored and watchful. Graham lowered his voice. I tried to spare you embarrassment. Clara picked up the bid card and placed it where it belonged. You have a gift for making threats sound charitable. You are standing in a room you do not understand, wearing a name you did not earn. She finally looked at him. And still, here you are, speaking to me like I am the only person in it who matters. His eyes flashed. You were my assistant. Clara smiled. I was excellent at it. You think that qualifies you for this? No, Clara said. Surviving you did. Graham leaned closer. You really believe Rourke cares about you? Clara's smile faded. I believe you are afraid he might. That struck deeper than she expected. Graham's face hardened. You should have stayed manageable. Clara felt the word hit the room between them. This time it did not cut. This time it clarified. She stepped closer, her voice low enough that only he could hear. You should have married someone who did not take notes. Then she walked past him toward the stage. The program began at 9. Dominic gave the opening remarks. He spoke well, of course. Men like Dominic did not waste words when a room was listening. He thanked the donors, the Port families, the board, the city. Then he paused. Clara, standing near the side of the stage, saw his hand tighten once on the edge of the podium. My mother, Evelyn Rourke, believed power was not measured by what a man could take, but by what his name protected when no one was watching. The room shifted. Patrick looked down. Cole near the back wall stopped smiling. Dominic continued. She began this foundation with no photographers, no speeches, and no appetite for praise. Tonight, my wife reminded me that some legacies do not survive because they are written down. They survive because someone refuses to let them be erased. His eyes found Clara. She forgot the room for one dangerous second. Dominic looked back at the audience. The Rourke Harbor Foundation will expand its legal aid program for women escaping coercive households and financial abuse. The new initiative will be chaired by Clara Rourke. Silence. Then applause began. Not polite applause. Real applause building as people understood where the night had turned. Clara stepped onto the stage because there was nowhere else to go. Dominic moved aside for her. He did not place a hand on her back. He did not guide her. He gave her the podium and stepped away. That almost undid her more than any touch could have. Clara looked out at the ballroom, at the donors, at Graham, at the women near the front who had stopped whispering and started listening. Her notes waited on the podium, but she did not look down. "My father owns a restaurant," she said. "When I was a girl, I thought power meant the person who got the best table. Then I grew up and learned power is often quieter than that. It is in loan papers people sign because they are desperate. It is in phone calls no one records. It is in the way a person can be surrounded by people and still have no safe door out." The room had gone still. Clara's voice held. "This foundation will help build those doors." She did not look at Graham when she said it. She did not need to. After the speech, people came to her, women first, then donors, then a judge's wife who pressed Clara's hand for too long and said, "That was necessary." A port supervisor asked about Luis Ortega, and Clara saw Dominic watching from across the room when she answered with exact details. She was not decoration. Not that night. Not ever again. Near midnight, she stepped onto a balcony for air. The Mississippi moved black and silver beyond the hotel. The city lights trembled on the water. Behind her, jazz softened through the glass doors. Dominic came out a minute later. Of course he knew where to find her. For a while, neither spoke. Then Clara said, "You should have warned me. You would have told me not to do it." "Yes, I know." She looked at him. He stood beside her, hands resting on the balcony rail, eyes on the river. "You gave me public power tonight." "No," he said. "I stopped withholding what you had already taken." Her chest tightened. That was almost humble. "Do not spread rumors." A laugh slipped out of her before she could stop it. Dominic looked at her then. Something in his face changed slowly, like a door opening in a room he had kept locked for years. "You were magnificent." The words were quiet. Clara's smile faded. "Do not say things like that, unless you mean them." "I do." The river moved below them. Inside, the music changed to something slower. Clara looked down at his hand on the railing. The same hand that had offered her a way out in a church. The same hand that had claimed too much, controlled too much, then learned inch by inch how to let go without leaving. She moved first, just one step closer. Dominic did not touch her. He waited. That waiting was the thing that broke her. Clara lifted her hand to his chest, feeling the steady beat beneath his shirt. "I am choosing this," she whispered. His eyes searched hers. "Be sure. I am tired of men asking me to doubt myself." Dominic's hand rose slowly, giving her every chance to move away. She did not. His fingers touched her jaw like a question. Clara answered by kissing him. Not for Graham, not for the ballroom, not for a contract, a will, a name, or a room full of people who needed convincing. This kiss had no audience except the river and the city that had watched her run. Dominic's control held for one breath. Then it changed. His arm came around her waist, not to trap her, but to pull her closer, after she had already chosen the distance. Clara felt the heat of him, the restraint the hunger kept on a leash because she had asked for boundaries, and he had finally begun to understand that keeping them mattered. When they parted, his forehead rested near hers. His voice was rough. "Clara." She closed her eyes. "Do not ruin it by saying something practical." His breath moved like almost laughter. I was going to say your name again. She opened her eyes. Then you may continue. Inside the ballroom, Cole stood in the shadow near the balcony doors. He had seen enough. For once, no joke came. His face held something strange and quiet, a loneliness too old to be blamed on the evening. His phone buzzed in his hand. Cole looked down. The message was from Graham Mercer. Your brother took what should have been yours. Help me take it back. Cole stared at the words until the screen dimmed. Then he slipped the phone into his pocket and walked away from the music. Cole did not answer the message that night. He stood in the hotel's service corridor with the music fading behind him and Graham Mercer's words glowing on his phone like a dare written by a stupid man. Your brother took what should have been yours. Help me take it back. For most of his life, that sentence would have found a home in him. It knew where to press. Older by 6 minutes. Chosen second in every room that mattered. The spare son with the sharper smile, the louder sins, the easier reputation. Dominic got trust. Cole got warnings. Dominic got the keys to the docks. Cole got told not to burn the house down while holding a match he had never asked for. He stared at the message until the screen went black. Then he smiled. Not happily. Not kindly. The kind of smile that came before someone learned they had mistaken a wound for an invitation. Across town, Graham waited in the private back room of a closed cigar lounge near Canal Street. The place smelled of leather-stale smoke and men who called corruption networking. Rain tapped against the windows. A glass of untouched whiskey sat in front of him. Cole arrived 20 minutes late. Graham stood too quickly. Cole. Cole shut the door behind him and looked around the room. Mercer. You picked a dramatic little cave. I needed privacy. You needed a better tailor. You looked desperate. Graham's jaw flexed, but he swallowed the insult. That alone told Cole how badly he wanted this. I know you and Dominic have tension. Cole walked to the table and picked up the whiskey. He smelled it, made a face, and set it down. Tension is for piano wire and bad marriages. My brother and I have history. Then you understand what it feels like to have him take everything. Cole's smile thinned. Careful. Graham leaned in. The will should favor you. You are older. By 6 minutes. 6 minutes is still first. Cole sat down slowly. Go on. I enjoy hearing men flatter me when they are scared. Graham opened a folder and slid papers across the table. I have evidence that the marriage can be challenged. Clerical issues, timing, witness concerns, Clara's mental state. With the right testimony, Dominic's claim weakens. Cole glanced at the papers. Clara's mental state. She was hysterical. Cole's eyes lifted. She looked clear enough when she burned your life down in front of half the city. Graham's smile vanished. She is nothing without men giving her position. Cole sat back. There it was. The mistake. Not the plan. Not the greed. Not even the arrogance. The mistake was that Graham still did not understand Clara Rourke. Graham continued mistaking silence for interest. I can help you contest Dominic's control. I have partners at the port who want him distracted. A shipment goes bad. Federal eyes turn toward Rourke Maritime. His new wife gets questioned, the board panics, and you become the reasonable alternative. Cole's phone rested face down on his thigh, recording every word, and Clara Graham's expression cooled. She signs a statement, says she was pressured, says Dominic isolated her, says she wants out, and if she refuses... Graham looked out at the rain. People refuse many things until family becomes involved. Cole's smile disappeared completely. Graham looked back. Her father's restaurant is old wiring and grease traps. Fires happen. For 1 second, Cole was 12 years old again, standing in a hallway, while his father explained that family was not love. Family was territory. Family was blood worth defending because it carried your name whether you liked the person or not. He rose. Graham rose too, misreading the movement. We both get what we want, Graham said. Cole stepped close enough that Graham's confidence faltered. You really thought I hated my brother more than I hate being used? Graham went still. Cole leaned in voice almost gentle. And you threatened Clara's father to my face. She is not your concern. Cole's laugh was quiet. See, that is where everyone keeps getting confused. He picked up the folder, tapped it once against Graham's chest, then shoved it back into his hands. She walked into our funeral by accident. Bad luck for you. Worse luck for us, maybe. But she walked out O'Rourke. His eyes turned cold. And nobody threatens O'Rourke in a cheap cigar room. Graham's hand twitched toward his pocket. Cole's gun was already against his ribs. Do not. The room held its breath. Cole took Graham's phone from the table and slipped it into his own coat. Tell your partners the meeting went well. Graham's face hardened with fear and rage. You think Dominic will thank you? No. Cole stepped back. That is why I'm not doing it for him. Clara was awake when Cole came to the estate. The house was quiet, but she had not been able to sleep since the gala. Dominic had walked her to her room after the balcony stopped at her door and kissed the back of her hand like he was trying to be careful with a fire he wanted badly to touch. Then he had left. That almost hurt worse than if he had stayed. She sat near the window in a robe looking down at the garden where the fire pit lay dark. When a black car rolled through the gates after 2 a.m, she knew before she saw him that it was Cole. A knock came at her door 10 minutes later. Not Dominic's knock, not Patrick's. Cole opened the door only after she said his name. He stood in the hall with rain in his hair and no smile on his face. I need to show you something. Clara tightened the robe at her waist. If this is one of your games, I am tired. It is not. That made her open the door wider. He handed her his phone. She listened to the recording without sitting down. Graham's voice filled the room smooth and poisonous. The shipment, the challenge, the statement, the threat against her father's restaurant. When it ended, Clara stood very still. Cole watched her. I came to you first. She looked up. Why? His mouth curved, but the smile did not reach his eyes. Because if I went to Dominic first, he would turn Graham into a missing person before breakfast. And you think I will stop him? No, Cole said. I think you will aim him. Clara almost laughed. It came out like a breath instead. She handed the phone back. You did the right thing. Cole looked away. I hate when people say that. Sounds temporary. It does not have to be. His eyes returned to hers. For a moment he looked younger than she had ever seen him. Not soft. Just tired of being sharp. You know, he said quietly for 6 minutes, I had everything. Clara understood. Maybe not the details, not the old wounds, but the shape of them. Then take something else, she said. Cole's brow lifted. What? Not the throne. Not Dominic's place. Take your own. He looked at her for a long time. Then he gave a small, humorless laugh. You are very irritating for a woman in a robe. And you are almost decent for a man who eats fruit with a knife. This time, his smile was real. Dominic arrived before sunrise. Patrick must have called him, or maybe Dominic simply had a sense for danger sharpening inside his walls. He entered Clara's sitting room in a black coat, rain on his shoulders, eyes moving first to Clara, then Cole, then the phone on the table. Explain. Clara stood. Ask. Dominic stopped. The old command stayed behind his teeth. He looked at her, then drew a breath through his nose. What happened? Cole leaned back in his chair. Progress. Dominic did not look amused. They played the recording. By the end, the room had gone colder than morning. Dominic's face did not change, but Clara saw the violence arrive behind his eyes. It was silent, controlled, terrible. "He threatened your father," Dominic said. "Yes," Cole said. "He also implicated a port faction and at least one vendor in the shipment setup." Dominic looked at his brother. "You met him alone." Cole smiled faintly. "You sound worried. You sound proud of being reckless. I contained myself. That is personal growth." Clara stepped between them before the old fight could take the room. "Graham wants me alone. We can use that." "No," Dominic said. Clara turned to him. The word hung there. Dominic's jaw tightened. Then slowly he corrected himself. "I do not want you near him. That is not the same as no. It is close." She moved nearer. "Dominic, he has spent years using rooms where everyone believes him first. Let him think he has one more." His eyes held hers. "He threatened your family. And I am done letting that make me obedient." The silence that followed was not agreement, but it was listening. That afternoon, Clara called Graham from a phone Patrick had stripped clean. Her voice was steady when he answered. "I heard you wanted to talk." Graham exhaled softly. "Clara, thank God. Are you alone?" "No." A pause. "You need to be. If you want me to listen, you will tell me where." He gave her the address of an old warehouse near the river, a Mercer storage property half abandoned after a failed redevelopment deal. "Come without Rourke," he said. Clara looked through the glass wall of Dominic's study, where Dominic stood with Patrick and Cole over a map of the port. "I will come without my husband," she said. She ended the call before Graham could hear the lie inside the truth. She did not arrive with Dominic. She arrived beside him. The warehouse stood near the river, its brick walls dark with rain, windows broken in high rows. Water slapped against the dock pilings below. Sodium lights buzzed overhead, turning everything sickly gold. Clara stepped from the car in a dark coat, her hair pinned back, face calm. Dominic came around beside her. "No heroics," he said. She looked at him. No orders. His mouth tightened. "Please." That word again. Less painful this time. Clara nodded. Inside, Graham waited beneath a hanging light. Two men stood near the rear entrance, another near the stairs. Vanessa was not there. That detail told Clara Graham had stopped pretending this was about pride and started revealing it was about survival. Ray Whitaker sat in a chair near the office door, wrists tied blood at the corner of his mouth. Clara's calm nearly broke. "Dad." Ray lifted his head. "Clara, don't." Dominic moved one step. Graham raised a gun. "Careful." The warehouse seemed to inhale. Dominic stopped. His voice was quiet. "You touch him again, and there will not be enough of you left for a closed casket." Graham's hand shook slightly. Clara saw it. "Good. You wanted me here," she said. "I am here." Graham looked at her, then Dominic. "I said alone." Clara stepped forward. "No, Graham. You said without Rourke. You never understood that I am Rourke now." His face twisted. "You are playing dress up in another man's name. I wore your ring for 2 years. I know dress up when I see it." Cole's voice came from the shadows above them. "And I know a bad plan when I'm invited into one." Graham looked up. Cole stood on the metal stairs with a gun in one hand and Graham's stolen phone in the other. Behind him, Rourke men moved quietly into place. Graham's expression collapsed for half a second. Then he grabbed Ray by the shoulder and hauled him upright, gun pressing near his neck. Clara's heart slammed against her ribs. Dominic's voice dropped into something deadly. "Let him go." Graham laughed wild around the edges. You think you own every room you enter? Both of you. But she was mine first. Clara walked forward before Dominic could stop her. Do not say that again. Graham stared at her. You think you won because he chose you? No. She stopped a few feet away. I won when I ran. The words reached him. She saw it. Clara continued, voice steady. You called me manageable because you needed me quiet. You called me useful because you needed my work. You called me unstable because I finally told the truth without asking your permission. Her eyes moved to her father, then back. You are not powerful, Graham. You are a weak man with access. His mouth tightened. You stupid girl. Dominic moved. So did Cole. So did Graham. The gun shifted toward Clara. A shot cracked through the warehouse. For one stunned second, no one moved. Then Graham cried out and dropped the gun, blood spreading across his forearm. Cole stood above with his weapon still raised, face pale but steady. Rourke men surged in. Dominic reached Clara first, pulling her behind him only after she had already stepped back on her own. Patrick cut Ray loose. Graham went to his knees, cursing, clutching his arm as sirens sounded outside. Clara looked at Dominic. You called the police federal agents, Patrick said from behind her. Different appetite. Cole descended the stairs, phone in hand. Graham's confession vendor records shipment plans, threat against Ray. All gift-wrapped. Graham looked up from the floor, face slick with sweat. You think this ends me? Clara stepped out from Dominic's side. Dominic led her. That mattered more than anyone in the room knew. She crouched in front of Graham close enough that he had to look at her. You built your life thinking women like me stay quiet because shame is heavier than anger. Her voice softened. You should have paid better attention. I carried both. She stood as agents entered the warehouse. Graham shouted her name as they pulled him up. Clara did not turn around. Outside, dawn had begun to thin the sky over the river. Ray sat in the back of an ambulance with a blanket around his shoulders, refusing the hospital with the stubbornness of a man who had survived harder things than a split lip. Helen arrived in tears and nearly knocked Clara over with the force of her hug. Dominic stood several yards away speaking to Patrick. He had not come close, not because he did not want to, because he was waiting. Clara saw it and went to him. His eyes moved over her face. Are you hurt? No. Are you lying? No. A beat. Then Clara said, Thank you for not stepping in front of me. Dominic's face changed. I wanted to. I know. I still want to. I know that too. He looked toward the river. When he spoke, his voice was low. I don't know how to love without guarding the door. Clara stepped closer, then learned the difference between guarding it and locking it. 3 days later, Dominic handed Clara an envelope in his study. No audience, no performance, no Patrick near the door. Just the two of them and a silence that felt heavier than any argument. Clara opened it. Inside were her original identification documents, a bank account in her own name with enough money to insult her pride, the deed proving her father's restaurant debt, cleared, and annulment papers. Unsigned. Her throat tightened. Dominic stood across from her, hands at his sides. I will not be another man you had to survive. Clara looked at the papers until the words blurred. You want me to leave? No. The answer came too fast, too honest. Dominic swallowed. I want you free enough to choose whether you stay. The study became very quiet. Clara folded the papers and placed them back in the envelope. I need time. His face held, but something in his eyes moved. You will have it. She left the Rourke estate that afternoon with one suitcase, her grandmother's necklace, and no guard in the car behind her. For 6 days, Clara stayed above her parents' restaurant. She woke to the smell of coffee, onions, and bread. She helped her father check invoices. She peeled peaches with her mother at the counter. She slept in her childhood room under a quilt Helen had made when Clara was 15. The room was too small. The bed creaked. The radiator hissed. No one stood outside her door. No one told her what to wear. No one called her Mrs. Rourke. At first, that felt like peace. Then, slowly, peace began to sound like waiting. On the 6th evening, rain came back to New Orleans. Clara stood at the restaurant window watching water blur the streetlights. Helen came to stand beside her. "You miss him?" Clara did not answer. Her mother smiled sadly. "Baby, I did not ask if you forgave him. I said you miss him." Clara pressed her fingers to the envelope in her coat pocket. "I miss who he is trying to become." Helen took her hand. "That may be the only version of a person worth loving." Clara walked back through the iron gates just before dark. No one stopped her. Patrick opened the front door as if he had been expecting her all along. His eyes dropped to the envelope in her hand, then returned to her face. "Mrs. Rourke." Clara smiled faintly. Not yet. She found Dominic in the garden beside the fire pit where she had burned her first wedding dress. He stood in a white shirt with sleeves rolled, looking into flames that had only just been lit. He turned when he heard her. For once, he looked surprised. "Clara." She walked toward him in a simple white dress, not bridal, not expensive enough to make a statement, but chosen. Her hair was loose. Rain darkened the ends. Dominic did not move. She held up the envelope. His face went still. For one breath, he looked like a man bracing for the blade he had handed her. Clara opened the envelope, took out the annulment papers, and dropped them into the fire. The edges curled. The signature's lines blackened. Dominic watched them burn. Clara looked at him through the rising smoke. The first wedding was survival. His voice was rough. Yes. The first vows were a bargain. Yes. She stepped closer. "If you still want a wife, ask me properly." The silence that followed felt like the whole city holding its breath. Dominic lowered to one knee on the rain-dark stone. Not smoothly, not like a performance, like a man surrendering pride because something mattered more. "Clara Whitaker," he said. Then stopped. His voice had changed. He tried again. "Clara Whitaker Rourke. I love you. Not because of the will, not because of my name, not because you make me stronger in rooms where people are watching." He looked up at her. "I love you because you walked into my life while running for yours, and somehow made me want to be more than the man waiting at the door." Clara's eyes filled. Dominic held her gaze. "Marry me again. Freely. Fully. With every door open." Clara laughed through the tears. "You are still dramatic." "Yes." She reached for him. "Yes." The second wedding took place in St. Augustine Church 2 weeks later. No locked doors, no coffin beneath white lilies, no groom pounding outside in the rain. This time the doors stood open. Ray walked Clara down the aisle, his hand firm over hers. Helen cried before the music even started. Patrick stood near the front with eyes suspiciously bright. Cole stood beside Dominic, perfectly dressed, almost solemn, until Clara reached the altar. Then he leaned toward Dominic and murmured just loud enough for her to hear, "If you ruin this, I am keeping her." Dominic did not look at him. "I will shoot you during the hymn." Cole smiled. "There is the brother I know." Clara had to bite the inside of her cheek not to laugh. Dominic saw it and smiled, openly, softly, for her. Their vows were not long. Clara looked at him and said, "I once ran into this church because I had nowhere else to go. Today I walk in because this is where I choose to stand." Dominic's eyes shone, though no tear fell. He said, "I gave you my name before I gave you my heart." I was wrong to think the name mattered more. It does not. You do. When the priest pronounced them husband and wife, Dominic waited. Clara smiled. "You may kiss me." He did. The church erupted. Cole whistled. Helen sobbed. Ray muttered something about Rourke men being too handsome for their own good, which made Patrick cough into his hand. Months later, the Rourke Harbor Foundation opened its first legal aid office for women leaving coercive homes and financially abusive marriages. The plaque by the door read, Evelyn Rourke House. Clara stood before a room full of donors, lawyers, doc families, and women who did not yet know how brave they were. Dominic stood at the back, not beside the podium, not taking the room from her, just watching. When Clara finished speaking, applause rose around her. She found Dominic in the crowd. He lifted his glass slightly. Not ownership, recognition. That evening, they stood on the balcony of the Rourke estate while New Orleans glowed beneath a soft rain. The river moved beyond the trees. Jazz floated faintly from somewhere down the avenue. Dominic came up behind her, stopping close enough for warmth, not close enough to presume. Clara reached back and took his hand. Then she brought it to her stomach. Dominic went completely still. Clara. She leaned back against him. The will wanted an air. His hand trembled once beneath hers. She turned and looked at him. But this child is not being born for an empire. Dominic lowered his forehead to hers. No, he said, voice breaking at the edge. This child is ours. Below them, the gate stood open for the evening air. Inside the house, Cole was arguing with Patrick about whether babies preferred jazz or opera. Helen was in the kitchen with Giorgio claiming his gumbo still needed work. Ray was teaching one of Dominic's captains how to properly season cast iron. Clara listened to it all and smiled. Once she had run barefoot through New Orleans with no plan, no shoes, and no name that felt like hers. Now the city knew her as Clara Rourke. Not because Dominic had given her the name, because she had made it mean freedom.